Hey everyone, it's FrSky Steve. Welcome back to the channel. We are going to be talking about the FLVS sensor, the FrSky lipo voltage sensor. It's essentially a battery checker that you put in your plane and you keep it on full time, and you can pull information from it and look at your battery voltage or pack voltage in real time. Very useful, very powerful. We're going to talk about some tools to give this tool even more power and make it more convenient for you to fly with. So I wanted to remind you this is the home screen right here, and if we scroll over to this next one, this is the second home screen. You can tell by seeing right here the dot went from here to here. Essentially what this is a home screen we set up in a previous video. We just set it up so that the pack flight lipo, this was, as you recall, this is what we called the pack voltage. I had two things called lipo, so I put the word flight in front of it so you know it was the flight pack. So this is showing the real-time reading of your flight pack. This is showing the lowest value of your flight pack, and this is showing a running log of how your battery is getting drained as you fly. Very nice screen to set up, and we're going to go back to the main home screen. We're going to go into logic switches because this is, it's on the second screen by the way, this is what makes this really tick. So I'm going to talk about a few different logic switches and kind of describe what they do. The first one is we called low battery, and what happens is this was the three dashes and I named it. You have a choice of functions, and the one I chose was A is less than X. A is your source and X is your value. So we are looking at this and we are saying that when your pack voltage is less than 19.3 volts, this comes true. Now, one problem we might have is that as you're buzzing around, you might want to do a fast run and you really pick up the battery and start really hauling, and all of a sudden the pack voltage, you have a sag and the pack voltage drops down below 19.3 volts and your switch goes off and you're like, hey man, I just did this. I just started this flight 45 seconds ago, and why am I being messaged to come down? So what I came up with is this theory, which is that your pack voltage is probably going to sag for a few seconds. I don't know, maybe some people do fast runs for more than 7 seconds, but in my personal flying style, I don't usually kick up the throttle for that long of a period of time. So what I did is I came up with this thing, delay before active, and essentially what this does is, this is, the best analogy is a boxer. When he gets knocked down, they start counting him down, and if he gets up somewhere before 10 seconds, the fight resumes, and if he gets knocked down again, they start the 10-second countdown again. So what we're doing is we're giving this condition about 7 seconds. It has to be true for 7 seconds, and then right after that, this will come on. So it's not true at all until the 7 seconds have happened, and then after that, boom, here we are. The other question you might have is, what is the right value? And I can tell you from firsthand experience, whatever you think of is probably too high, because these batteries tend to have a way of just, I don't know, they seem to look like when they're under load, they seem to drop down quite considerably. Then when the flight's over, you can see them kind of spark back up. What I look for is landing a plane with the battery voltage somewhere between 3.7 to 3.8 volts a cell. Okay, so what you'll have to do is, if you feel like you're coming down too soon and you're leaving voltage, you come down and you have something like 3.85 volts per cell, and you're like, wow, that was too soon. You can keep lowering this value until you do land your plane within that 3.7 to 3.8 volts per cell range. So, piece of advice for you as far as that's concerned. Now we're going to talk about using this as a practical tool. So we're going to get out of here and we're going to jump over to special functions. And I've set up two things that I find to be useful. The first one is called play audio. This is just, we're going to play a sound. So the active condition is a logic switch, that low battery, right? And I'm going to have it repeat every 10 seconds, skip on startup, and the file is this thing that I didn't have a good file, so I had one with a weird name, if batty, but that would say low battery, and it would repeat every 10 seconds. And then the other thing I looked at was this thing called the home screen 2, which we talked about earlier. So what happens is there's this thing called go to screen, and when you have your active condition, once again, is that logic switch low battery. When that happens, it goes from screen 1 to screen 2. That's the screen is the home screen, right? Home screen 2. And so if you have like a ton of different home screens, it will jump to this one when you have a low battery. So you can look down and see your screen and see what your battery is actually at. So really kind of handy. Now, the one thing that I did, and so when I set these things up, I actually go out and fly with them. And the thing that drove me insane about this whole setup was, you know, the thing would go off and it'd start nagging you. Okay, low battery, low battery, low battery. And I'm like, cool, time to land my plane. Landed it. Yeah, everything looks great. And you know, picked the plane up, brought it back to where I powwow with my buddies, and for like 45 seconds, this thing every 10 seconds is screaming out low battery, and it was driving me insane because I hit the throttle cut, and it was still yelling it out. So I wanted to one-up this thing. I wanted to fix that, so when I turned off the throttle cut, it would go off. And so this is where things get a little different. I have this thing called low battery and, so it's the last logic switch there, LS5, and essentially what it is a combination of two conditions. The first one was that low battery logic switch that we were just talking about, and then what happens is something has to be true along with this. So two things have to be true. So that low battery voltage, the battery pack has to be below a certain level for it to go off. The other thing I had was this thing, I wanted to kill it when throttle cut was on. So in order to make this thing work, you would have to have the two conditions would have to be that the throttle cut was off. Now, why does it say throttle cut and have an exclamation point? That is something called the not switch. So what it means is when the throttle cut is not active, this thing is true. So the not, you get this by simply long pressing on that and pressing invert. And what that does is it puts the exclamation point, and it's essentially like saying throttle cut off. So what we're looking at, you have to have low battery and your throttle cut has to be off. Now, if the throttle cut, so you can see right here that throttle is active, right? But as soon as I land the plane, I press the throttle cut, all of a sudden this condition is no longer true and the voice stops. So hallelujah, that was something that we can fix about this. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is something that's interesting, something to play with. Maybe this will get you inspired to work with other things. This is kind of shows what you can do with a simple device, which is essentially a battery voltage checker. And what we're going to do is I create something called a sag-nag. And what this does is that when I have a condition where I am really starting to drain the battery, so I am really seeing a sag happen, and then my throttle is high, those two things simultaneously, when I feel like both those things are happening at the same time, the transmitter will start to vibrate to remind me, like, hey, you're really draining the battery right now. So this is kind of a really cool tool, and once again, it's something that you're going to have to kind of play with and see what you can do with it. But this kind of shows what logic switches can do for you. So it's essentially two different logic switches. The first one is the sag voltage. And so we're going to go back and look at that first one, sag voltage. So this is the sag voltage right here. If I long press on it, you'll see that it goes right into edit. And you can see I gave it sag voltages. If you have, all right, there we go, even better. If you go, now we have the name sag voltage. Once again, as A is less than X, the flight LiPo, or the flight pack, is less than 18 volts. So this is way down there. And maybe you find that this happens too soon. Maybe you look at telemetry and see that at some point in your flight you were down to 17.5 volts. So maybe 17.7 volts is a better thing than 18 volts. Regardless, whatever happens, the reality is that you kind of have to play with this number right here and see what works for you. So the reason why I find that important, though, is because someone told me that when you are landing your batteries and they're hot, what's happening is it is drawing out energy as fast as possible, and it's increasing the internal resistance of the battery. It's changing the chemistry. So you kind of want to avoid that whenever possible. So if you find that you're going through batteries, they don't last very long, this might be a tool that would be very useful for you. The other thing I wanted to have, and this is a throttle high, and 35%. I know this looks crazy, and you say, well, 35% doesn't seem very high. You got to keep in mind that the range runs from negative 100 to positive 100 when you talk about throttle. So negative 100 is the throttle all the way down, and positive 100 is the throttle all the way up. That means 0 is mid-throttle. So when you are 25% of the way up, it's like that's a quarter. It's a quarter of the way up from mid-throttle. And 35% is just a bit more than that. So somewhere in the 60 to 65% range of your throttle is when it's considered throttle high. Now maybe you might want to change that. Maybe you want to go to all the way up to 50%. So what that means is that your throttle is halfway between midpoint and all the way up. If your throttle's that high and your battery's sagging, then it will kind of remind you time to kick it down a little bit and knock it off. Okay, so we have those two conditions, and I've laid those out for you. What we're going to do is combine both of them together. So the sag-nag is a combination of the sag voltage one, which is showing that your voltage is sagged below a certain level for your flight pack, and your throttle is higher. Again, up to you what position it is exactly. But those two, if it's above a certain throttle and if it's the voltage is sagging, then this condition is true and this thing will turn green. So what happens? We go to special functions and we go to this thing called haptic. And what it will do is it will vibrate your whole radio. So you'll feel like, and I turned this up to strength 8 because I want, well, it was for me, I would want to know, like, hey, this is time to knock it off. So the pattern is 3, so it does dent, dent, dent. It's kind of like buzz, 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 and it repeats every 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds, if you're still doing this, you're going to get that buzz. And what will happen is when you drop below one of those two conditions, if your sag voltage is higher than what you specified, or you drop your throttle down, it's no longer true, and this turns red, like right here, and this whole thing turns off, and the buzzing turns off. So a very useful tool, and that kind of shows the power of what you can do with just using simple logic switches. Something that aids you when you're flying, where you don't really have to think about it. It's just the radio reminds you when something is wrong. And with that, I think we've covered everything. I do thank you for watching. This concludes the FrSky FLVS sensor, and please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thanks for watching.